Under the limelight, the colorful and courageous rock pioneer Todd Rundgren finally shares his conflicted thoughts about the Beatles, and John Lennon in particular. Rundgren argues that not all aspects of the Beatles' legacy are worthy of the acclaim they receive, despite the fact that they were the band that influenced the 1960s and produced music that lasted beyond decades. His incisive remarks exposed Lennon's frequently disregarded shortcomings, including his hostile relationships with other musicians and his controversial behavior. According to Rundgren, Lennon was frequently at the center of the chaos that existed underneath the Beatles' well-preserved exterior, a world of egos, rivalries, and dysfunction. The peak of Lennon's solo career after the Beatles was in the early 1970s. Already well known for his audacious approach to music, Rundgren never held back when voicing his opinions. Rundgren didn't mince words when he was asked about Lennon's solo work in an interview, calling it excessively political and self-indulgent. Lennon, who was well known for both his sharp tongue and his thin skin, was offended by the remarks. Lennon responded in his characteristically caustic manner in the ensuing fierce verbal duel that took place in the press. According to Rundgren, Lennon believed he was untouchable and was incapable of taking criticism. Despite never being close, the two artists were embroiled in a public feud that was a reflection of their divergent ideologies. Lennon's writing frequently strayed into what Rundgren perceived as egocentric area, whereas Rundgren praised creativity and independence from commercial demands. Despite their limited interactions, they revealed a deeper aspect of Lennon's personality, a guy who thrived on conflict but found reflection difficult. Lennon's disputes, of course, extended beyond Rundgren. Lennon's conflict with Paul McCartney was arguably the most well-known and widely reported dispute of his career. After the Beatles broke up in 1970, the two, who had previously been inseparable creative partners, turned against one another. According to Rundgren, this exemplifies Lennon's incapacity to keep amicable connections with his closest friends and family. Lennon was erratic and frequently nasty, whereas McCartney was methodical and tactful. Lennon wrote How Do You Sleep, a biting critique of McCartney that left little room for interpretation, during the dissolution of the Beatles. McCartney was criticized for being superficial and commercial in the song Dripping with Bitterness. According to Rundgren, Lennon's fears overpowered his talent during this petty period. More than a simple conflict of egos, the split between Lennon and McCartney represented the end of a time and the dissolution of an enduring relationship. Lennon's musical rivalry are not the only thing that Rundgren performs. Additionally, he highlights the singer's nuanced public relations, especially during his time as a political activist. Despite being renowned, Lennon's peace initiatives frequently came across as theatrical to critics such as Rundgren, who saw contradictions in Lennon's activity. How could a man who publicly criticized his former bandmates and got into acrimonious arguments with peers be a peacemaker? According to Rundgren, Lennon carried his activity as a badge of honor but did not live up to its ideals in his private life. One example is the notorious Bed-ins for Peace, in which Lennon and Yoko Ono allowed the media into their hotel room to advocate for nonviolence. These incidents, albeit revolutionary in their own right, also brought Lennon's need for fame to light. Rundgren describes them as antics that further muddied Lennon's already divisive image by obfuscating the distinction between self-promotion and true advocacy. John Lennon's fiery temperament, which left a legacy of broken relationships, frequently overshadowed his genius. Rundgren draws attention to Lennon's ability to be conflictual, which went beyond disagreements about his work to include open struggles for control and ego. His tumultuous association with similarly unpredictable producer Phil Spector, which promised genius but frequently teetered on the verge of mayhem, was the clearest example of this. In addition to the music they created, their studio sessions were renowned for the violent altercations that characterized them. Lennon's equally unyielding character was in contrast to Spector's quirkiness and authoritarian attitude. The outcome? Sessions that were both revolutionary and tense. An atmosphere where tempers erupted and patience wore thin resulted from Spector's unpredictable conduct, which was frequently made worse by his well-known tendency toward unpredictability, and Lennon's perfectionism. This dynamic, according to Rundgren, is representative of Lennon's incapacity to manage cooperation without confrontation. Much though their collaboration resulted in brilliant moments like Imagine and the rock and roll album, it also left a poisonous legacy that made Lennon's already turbulent career connections much more difficult. Lennon's disagreements went well beyond his external partners and touched the core of the Beatles. Rundgren illuminates Lennon's tense relationship with George Harrison, whose reserved manner frequently concealed underlying animosity. Harrison appreciated Lennon's talent, but Lennon's domineering nature often overshadowed him and rejected or discounted his efforts. Despite his popularity with fans, Lennon's scathing humor frequently had a harsh undertone that caused serious division within the Beatles. Amid the soaring egos of Lennon and McCartney, Harrison, whose songwriting flourished in the latter years of the Beatles, found it difficult to get his voice heard. According to Rundgren, Lennon disregarded Harrison's opinions, which not only made Harrison feel excluded but also planted the seeds of dissension inside the group. Harrison's annoyance with Lennon's supremacy was evident during the recording of Let It Be, and even after Harrison made his mark with songs like Something and Here Comes the Sun, the wounds from Lennon's arrogance persisted. According to Rundgren, a recurrent element in Lennon's career has been his incapacity to share the limelight. Lennon's drive to maintain control frequently weakened the very bonds that drove his creative talent, whether they were with Spector, Harrison, or even McCartney. According to Rundgren, Lennon was a man who enjoyed conflict and could escalate a small argument into a struggle for dominance. His relationships were a mirror of his inner conflicts, which included a need for connection and a tendency to push others away with his acerbic remarks and unyielding demands. Lennon's challenging nature was evident in his relationships even outside of the studio. Rundgren remembers how Lennon's love of conflict carried over into his private life, with heated arguments and lasting animosity frequently interspersing his encounters with colleagues and collaborators. Lennon's tale is one of broken relationships, a path of strife left in the wake of his genius, whether it was his secret conflict with Harrison or his public battle with Paul McCartney. Rundgren highlights the paradox of Lennon's life. He was a brilliant guy who influenced the history of music, but his erratic temperament frequently caused him to become estranged from those closest to him. Though they also show the difficulties of dealing with someone who was as confrontational as he was inventive, his interactions with Spector and Harrison were characterized by flashes of genius. According to Rundgren, Lennon's legacy serves as a warning about the price of ego and the brittleness of bonds when confronted with unwavering ambition. The tales of Lennon's struggles serve as a depressing reminder of the human frailties that lie beneath the myth, even as his music continues to inspire. Rundgren's viewpoint provides a more profound comprehension of Lennon's multifaceted character, a man who could work his magic in the studio but frequently left chaos in his wake. The legacy of John Lennon is both bright and dark, and his tale is one of great contrast. According to Rundgren, Lennon has the ability to enthrall millions with the unvarnished honesty of his songs while simultaneously alienating those closest to him with his scathing remarks and unyielding ego. Lennon's capacity to infuse his songs' love with universal feelings, his intensity of loss, hope, and defiance was unmatched, yet it frequently seeped into his personal life, leaving a path of broken relationships in its wake. There was a quarrel, a resentment, or a betrayal behind each of his masterpieces. Although his talent was apparent and his magnetism was captivating, his instability was unavoidable. Lennon is portrayed by Rundgren as a man caught in a paradox. The guy who composed Imagine, a timeless call for peace and unity, was on one side, as was the brilliant artist. The other was a character portrayed by insecurities who frequently reacted violently toward those he thought posed a threat or were in his way. Lennon's personal and professional relationships were characterized by this paradox. He had the ability to create strong ties, but when his darker tendencies took control, he was as skilled at destroying them. A room could be illuminated by his charisma, but it would be rapidly extinguished by his rage. Lennon himself frequently found it difficult to live up to the ideals of love and harmony that were expressed in his music. He was a strange person who could write lyrics that touched the globe but was unable to show the same empathy to those in his inner circle, according to Rundgren, whose creativity was inextricably linked to his imperfections. Millions of people are still moved by Lennon's music, but Rundgren's story highlights the toll his unyielding nature took on those around him. His thirst for control and his scathing wit left little opportunity for cooperation, therefore his creative partnerships were frequently tense. He was a challenging collaborator because of the same traits that made him a leader in the Beatles: his audacity, vision, and bravery. According to Rundgren, Lennon's fixation on having the final say was both a strength and a weakness in both his life and his art. Beneath the praise and fame, Lennon was a man who frequently disagreed with himself. Rundgren describes the loneliness that accompanied his genius as self-imposed seclusion brought on by his incapacity to genuinely rely on or trust other people. In addition to being a place where Lennon could create without constraint, this seclusion served as both a haven and a jail where he battled his inner demons. Rundgren believes that Lennon's legacy demonstrates the complexity of genius. It's a tale of heartbreaking lows and amazing highs. Of a man who frequently left disaster in his wake but was able to turn chaos into beauty. Lennon was a dreamer who battled cynicism, a voice for peace who was frequently at odds with himself, and an artist whose work brought the world together even as his relationships broke down around him. His contrasts add depth to his story. The mythos surrounding Lennon and the Beatles is deepened by Rundgren's observations, which serve as a reminder that excellence is rarely free. Although Lennon's genius helped define a generation, it also served as a warning that even the brightest stars may have the darkest shadows. Ultimately, his legacy is multifaceted and reflects the man himself, bright, flawed, and unforgettable.